Dan is het woord nu aan mevrouw Donohue, Catherine Donohue. Die werkt bij het US Corps of Engineers. Dat is de Rijkswaterstaat van Amerika, maar zoals u weet valt dat onder het ministerie van Defensie. En er is ook een generaal, is daar directeur-generaal, die is de baas, maar direct daaronder zijn civilians. En ook mevrouw Donohue is een civilian, die heeft geen uniform. Please, Catherine, I hope you understood what I said a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. You have learned enough Dutch yet.
To fake it, yes.
Okay, please go ahead about Sandy.
Thank you. Goedemorgen. So I am Catherine Donohue, and I'm from the Army Corps of Engineers. Yes, it's a civilian organization that sits within our Department of Army. I'm here on exchange with Rijkswaterstaat because our two governments have a partnership, a relationship. So I'm here today to talk about Hurricane Sandy that happened in October of 2012, and it primarily hit the New York and New Jersey coast. So Manhattan, just to give you some reference, is the red star, and I come from the area with the blue star. And the four triangles are areas that experience coastal breach. Long Island is that island. It's about almost 40 kilometers north to south, and the elevation where the blue star is about 32 meters above sea level, and the southern area is about 1 meter below sea level, which is similar to the southern tip of Manhattan. That's about 1 meter over sea level. And then as you go north, Manhattan gets a bit higher. So the topics for today, I just want to give you an orientation of the Corps relative to the Dutch way of managing levee safety, dike safety. Preparing for the storm, impacts and our response and lessons learned. So the Army Corps of Engineers has one headquarters in Washington, D.C., where the STAR is. There are 8 regional offices that provide oversight, and 38 civil districts where the yellow diamonds are. And that's very similar to the way your structure is with the water boards and Rijkswaterstaat. I would like to explain a little bit about our inventory, because it's very different than how you manage dikes in the Netherlands, which everything is a national management. We have about 100,000 miles of levees in the U.S., and only the red, yellow, and green are in the Army Corps of Engineers inventory. The red is what we manage and operate, and the yellow and green is what our local sponsors manage and operate, and they are in our rehabilitation inspection program. So we inspect them, and we that's how they maintain their eligibility in the FEMA recovery help. The blue levees are not part of that program. So, yeah. I just want to go back, or just to say, and based on what category the inventory is, it affects how we can respond in the case of an emergency. So that 15% that was colored not blue, we can respond a little bit more quickly than the blue area. The blue area, if there's a project that falls in that category, there's a national response framework, and the locals respond to flood fighting first. When they're responsible for managing and in a storm, and when their resources are exhausted, they will call the state. And when the state's resources are exhausted, the governor of the state will call the president and request assistance. The president will make a declaration. He will then engage FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is a different agency than the Army Corps of Engineers. They manage emergencies. If it's a dike structure, they will call the Army Corps in to help. So, preparing for the storm. These are some pictures that are not part of our inventory. So That is a tunnel closure in Virginia, not part of, that would be in the blue area, and a railroad crossing. So we have a hurricane season from June to December, and we prepare for the season by having a lot of coordination meetings. And regional catastrophe teams meet and discuss in the beginning of the season to make sure we're all prepared for a hurricane season. At our projects, and specifically, we test during routine inspections all the pumps and gates and make sure they close, and we encourage our local sponsors to run exercises where they simulate an event and actually go out and respond to a simulated hurricane. So, preparing for Sandy in particular. Through our coordination, we get a lot of advance notice from our National Weather Service. It's usually days that we know a storm is coming, and as the day gets closer, the track will tighten and we'll get a more clear answer of where the storm will fall. Very similar to your barriers, we have standard operating procedures. When certain thresholds are met, barriers will be closed, and before Sandy, all the barriers were closed. We pre-released water behind our dams to make sure there was plenty of flood capacity behind the dams and we wouldn't have to flood the system after the storm came. And we pre-deployed, we knew it was going to be a big storm and we knew it would have a large impact. We pre-deployed a couple of mobile command centers with IT support so that when the storm hit, we would be prepared to communicate, et cetera. So because you're interested, I wanted to try and give you some background as to how the City of New York prepared as well, but the Army Corps of Engineers and the cities, the local sponsors, they act independently. Like I said, the locals are responsible for reacting to the events, and we're there with technical assistance if requested and help through FEMA if need be. So with a grain of salt, I tell you how the City of New York prepared. There was a mandatory evacuation for Lower Manhattan. The mayor of New York took a little bit of risk in doing this because a year previous we had some tropical storms come projected to hit New York, and the storm then veered a little bit west, and so the mayor of New York had evacuated New York City and nothing happened. So this time he did it again, and everybody was thinking nothing was going to happen, but he really held strong and evacuated the city, which was a very good thing. Public transportation was shut down. That was part of his evacuation. Get out because we're closing the system and you won't be able to get out. And they closed all the bridges and tunnels, which has a huge impact to Long Island, I was showing you before, and the 7.5 million residents. They are no longer able to leave the island once the bridges and the tunnels are closed. So the storm. So this is the track that Sandy took, and when she was gone, there were 8.5 million people out of power. That was one of the largest impacts right away that everybody noticed. So this is people, residents of New York City, standing on line for gas to run their generators. New York City and New Jersey was out of power probably for about 4 days, and Long Island was out of power for 1 to 2 weeks. So getting gas was a real challenge, and we had to go to austerity measures where every other day, depending on your license plate, you were allowed to go to the gas stations because there was no power and there was a hard time getting the gas onto Long Island. So the tunnels, the airports, the subways were all flooded. Lower Manhattan on the upper left was dark. There was no power for days. That's amazing. That's only happened once before, and it was only for a few hours. The coastal areas were flooded, inundated. On the upper left, there were terrible fires on the spit of Long Island. Here are just some pictures. So the storm actually hit about 10 kilometers south of Atlantic City. And Atlantic City was a gambling casino for fun. Before Las Vegas, there was Atlantic City. And there's a lot of boardwalks and all along the New Jersey coast, it's boardwalks and recreation, and it was all damaged in the storm. And here was the largest coastal breach. So the response. Right away, we go in and we fill breaches if requested. There was one breach on Long Island that was in a national park, and that still has not been closed because of different authorities through our Congress and mission areas. So the coastal response. We go in right away and fill in the red hatched areas. In the case of the breaches, all the green was gone, so we filled that in with red hatch. We come back through our recovery program to fill in the gray area afterwards. But the initial response is the red hatch. So the New York City response. I told you, I showed you that the tunnels were flooded, and this was an amazing undertaking that actually our Department of Army helped with the pumping out of water of the tunnel. It was a huge technical challenge because the tunnel is very long, very deep, and they were very concerned about the tunnel stability while pumping the water. So our comprehensive coastal recovery is going to be to go to all these red dot projects and fill in that gray area. We don't have as robust a program with beach nourishment as the Netherlands does, but through the program, through Sandy, through this terrible storm, it got attention and money, and so now we're going to be able to restore the projects to the design level. So lessons learned. The Army Corps has evaluated the performance of our coastal structures and prepared a report. We are in the process of studying the whole comprehensive coastal area, and that report will be out in 2005, where we'll be looking at our policies and our performance and everything about the coastal system. The city of New York was taken by surprise by all the water in the tunnels and the power system, and they prepared a 400 and something page resiliency plan for the city of New York. And both of those are available online. So lessons learned for the Corps of Engineers, that with interagency cooperation, it makes recovery much easier. From the National Weather Service coordinating with us days in advance and giving us updated storm tracks, and the cooperation between the local entities. New York, the governors of New York and New Jersey, I think, learned from the Katrina experience, and so they knew this would be a big storm, so they contacted the president before the storm happened, and because there was a declaration before the storm, FEMA and the Army Corps were able to move in before the storm with the liaisons and quickly help after the storm hit. And that was a bit of a challenge in the Louisiana area after Katrina. So lessons were learned and implemented in this storm. And we really aggressively brought resources to the area, and that really shortened the recovery period for a lot of these areas. These are the lessons learned for the city of New York. Proper evacuation does save lives. There were very few deaths from Sandy, and it was because New York City was evacuated. Requesting help in advance, the governors that I spoke about, that was very helpful. And yeah, the residents and the politicians now accept that there's a sea level rise challenge in New York. I don't think that was really thought about beforehand. So when thinking about the theme of this day, from hardship comes strength, it's really, I think, a great service to the residents that they now understand there's a risk in the coastal areas, in New York City, and I don't think people were aware of flood risk before. I know I wasn't. I lived in the Blue Star. I'm still aware of risk, but I don't think I have risk at 32 meters, but I think about it every day when I'm here living in the Netherlands. So, and you know, a great benefit of the storm, it's tragic that the storm happened, but now we are able to share lessons learned with our international partners. Next week, some of the Reichwaterstadt staff are going to come to New York and meet with our coastal engineers and have some good discussion, and I'm sure learn some lessons. So, and another strength I think that will come from this storm will be that we will look at our policies. You know, the one question I get asked a lot about this coastal recovery projects is, oh, are you going to build those projects now stronger? And no, our policies are still the same as before the storm. You know, we're going to continue to build projects the same way until we review our policies. So I think, you know, this will be a good growing pains for us. So.
Okay, thank you very much.